For the past few weeks at Equipment World, the editors here have spent much of our time with our collective ears to the ground, trying to make sense of just how the coronavirus pandemic is impacting the construction industry here in North America. Now, early on, we were simply hoping to get a better understanding of just how many contractors out there are working and how many are not, and the reasons for both of those outcomes. However, what we found out after dozens of Zoom interviews and phone calls is that the situation for the construction industry is far from clear-cut. Of course, for many North American contractors out there, the situation has been very clear-cut, a complete and total stoppage of work. Last week, we posted a video outlining the struggles of 4 U.S. contractors who have been shut down due to having to comply with stop work orders from state and local governments. If you haven't already, be sure to check that out. But the majority of contractors that we've spoken to in the last few weeks say they're still working, and that's very good news for an industry that just here in the last 24 months felt like it had finally and fully recovered from the economic downturn of 2008. However, the capacity at which these contractors are still working in the midst of the confusion surrounding the pandemic is all over the board. Welcome in everyone to Equipment World, where each week we bring you new videos on the latest in the construction industry, equipment, gear, trucks, and more. I'm Wayne Grayson, and today I'm joined by my colleague Tom Jackson.
Hey everybody, Tom Jackson here with Equipment World magazine.
In this video, Tom and I are going to discuss what it has been like to work construction in the midst of a global pandemic and how things may never be the same for this industry again. Let's get into it. So Tom, I'd like to start off with one contractor in particular that I think pretty neatly encapsulates just kind of how all over the place that this thing has been, and that's David A. Nice Builders, and they're headquartered in Williamsburg, Virginia. They've seen their total company revenues drop by more than 50%. But because the company has 4 divisions, the pandemic's impact has really been different depending on what division you're talking about, right?
Yeah, David A. Nice is a very diversified company. They have a civil division, a commercial division, retail, remodeling and building operation, and a millwork shop that kind of supports the commercial and the retail. And I talked to Brandon Nice, he's the company's vice president for construction operations, and he says the retail is hurting pretty bad right now. Most of those jobs have been put on hold. Commercial is kind of a mixed bag, but the good news for them is their civil division is still going strong. They're still doing their earthwork and their civil engineering jobs. And the millwork, oddly enough, is still going strong too, because they're providing support for the commercial side of things as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's that, like I said, that company is really like a great way to kind of to open things up and explain to everyone what really a mixed bag the pandemic has laid at the doorstep of most contractors out there. And the crisis has really highlighted to me what a segmented industry construction is, and just how many players and hands are involved in every project, and how really whenever a project is completed and everyone plays nice and is able to stay on the same page, it's kind of a minor miracle, and that's without a global pandemic going on.
Well, it certainly proves the value of diversifying your company. So at David A. Nice, it's pretty obvious that the owners for retail establishments, both stores and restaurants and malls, they're going to retreat for a good long while, and that's why they're seeing the losses there. The company also has contracts with SeaWorld and Busch Gardens and Colonial Williamsburg, which are big tourist destinations, and they tell me all those jobs, at least for the time being, been put on hold. So the thing to think about here is that tourism destinations are going to be closed and probably get no work at all out of those. Sports venues, hotels, and restaurants, construction that supports any of these leisure time activities is probably going to be on ice for quite a while now.
Okay, so from Virginia, let's move on to the great state of Texas. And you and I have both spoken with contractors there in the last few weeks. And while everyone in the U.S. has been impacted by this pandemic, contractors in Texas have kind of double dipped in the pain pool, right?
Yeah, they have. And the biggest problem after the coronavirus, perhaps, is the fact that oil has gone down to $18 a barrel right now, and the state really needs it about $40 a barrel for anybody to make money. So if the oil money isn't flowing, then Texas is almost in a recession just because of that. So you throw the coronavirus on top of it, and everybody's kind of scrambling to see what they can make of it. So we've been friends with Ken and Melissa Lester for a long time. They were one of our Contractor of the Year finalists in 2013. Very successful company, runs about $20 million in business every year. And their biggest client for more than a decade has been a big petrochemical plant just outside of Houston that produces plastics and all kinds of knock-on goods that come off of a barrel of oil. And they completely shut all outsiders out of their plant. They're still functioning at a certain level, but nobody from outside the company can go in and work on any project. So that was their number one source of revenue.
And we're going to actually hear from Ken and Melissa in a clip here.
The oil field, of course, is pretty dead, which we don't do a lot of actual oil field locations or oil field site work. But our economy is driven so much by the oil field. Mm-hmm. When they're impacted, the work that we do is also impacted. We've been able to maintain to keep all our employees, which is a good thing. We've cut our hours back some, taken off a little bit more. So far we've been able to keep all of our employees.
So Tom, what does the workload for the Lesters look like right now?
They didn't give me exactly that, but they did get some guidance from their local chapter, the Associated Builders and Contractors, who said there are 30 to 40% fewer projects out there for bid right now because people just aren't going to let bids for the time being.
So those have been put on hold. So of course, then that's affecting us. We're not bidding. We're not getting jobs. So yeah, it's the coronavirus has affected, our backlog because right now there's just a few projects that are out bidding, not as many as there would be without this virus. I think more of it, people are just not sure what the economy is going to do. So they don't want to pull the trigger on, new projects.
So we'll move on to over in Liberty Hill, Texas. Things have actually come to a standstill for Clint Stevenson. He is the president of CLS Excavation, and they're a heavy civil construction firm, which he runs with his wife, Amber. And not long after he returned from a trip to ConExpo in Las Vegas as part of our Contractor of the Year festivities this year, where he was a finalist, he watched as his jobs came to a complete halt. And for Clint, the problem has been either clients putting a hold on work or local municipalities not granting permits.
We finished a job we had in Austin that was there in Austin city limits and have been awarded several other jobs, but they're all waiting on permits. And so, we've got a lot of work that, we've been told low on and that sort of thing, but still just waiting on permitting. And that was one of the things, where they try to throttle it back is if there's a job already going on, they were fine with letting that continue. But if it's a new project, then they're just not issuing permits for them. And that's, that's really put the clamp on that.
So from Texas, let's move on to Port Monmouth, New Jersey, where Whirl Construction is just a ferry ride away from New York City, where as of April 29th, more than 165,000 coronavirus cases had been confirmed. And in New Jersey, the state where the company is actually based, there have been more than 114,000 cases. Despite his firm's proximity to the epicenter of the pandemic for the United States, Whirl Vice President Jim Davis Jr.'s crews are still at work.
Going into the second quarter of a season, we're usually rocking and rolling by now, and it's starting to get a log jam. So we don't have that log jam right now, which that is something that we think about and how we're going to turn this thing around. But everybody's in the same boat. So we're getting through it. We're navigating through it.
Whirl specializes in the construction of playgrounds and park areas mainly, including installation of playground equipment. Whirl has been able to continue working on 80% of the company's jobs, with about 3/4 of its employees still on the payroll.
Some customers, for whatever reason that their site warrants, they want us there. For instance, we're at a school that's not in session, obviously. So the decision makers want us to be at that school, as long as we're out of harm's way to do that work. We're not interfering with any children.
Now, in terms of backlog, Whirl's clientele is, they do a lot of public work since they're doing a lot of playground installs. A lot of that comes with local municipalities and schools. Now, most of that has not fallen off. However, a lot of that work has been postponed to a later date.
There's a few other customers that say, the mayor or the county has put a blanket order where they don't want any work being conducted. So we just know to back off, and when the time is right, we'll revisit those customers. That said, it takes a little more on the admin side for coordination, just to know and navigate who is looking for people to show up on sites and who absolutely doesn't want us there, because the last thing you want to do is show up and start working and get shut down and cause a stir up unnecessarily.
So one of the interesting things is there are contractors out there who are still going full speed and planning for a pretty busy season this year. One of those is Drake Construction in Komatsu, Alaska. They're actually 33 miles north of the Arctic Circle, and they do civil construction all over the western edge of Alaska. And one of the strengths they have is that most of their work is government work. It's either federal or state. They are building infrastructure for tribal villages and small towns all around the western perimeter of the state. But interestingly enough, they only have a 6-month season. There are no roads to most of their job sites. They take all the materials and their people and their machines either by barge or airplane, or sometimes they get on snow machines to get to where they're going. And so far, they're looking at a pretty busy season. They have about 50 employees. But they're preparing very aggressively for the possibility of the pandemic. They are very concerned about taking the virus to some of these remote villages. They're Native American villages that have been there for centuries, and they don't want any of their crews to possibly infect anybody in those villages. So in addition to the logistics problems they have, they are actually preparing now to set up lodging and to get food delivered to their crews in areas where their crews are never going to come in contact with anybody in those villages. So one of the reasons we chose Drake Construction for our Contractor of the Year was their superior logistics capabilities, and that's, I think, one of the reasons why they'll still continue to have a very successful season this year, because they've planned all this out in advance and they know what they're going to do. Sometimes 2, sometimes 3 seasons in advance, they'll know what they're up against.
So another contractor that we spoke with recently that has fared well in all of this uncertainty is Jeff Gertie out of Java Center, New York, and that's near Buffalo. Jeff is the owner of Just Barns, a company that specializes in the construction of barns and other post-frame structures, as well as metal roofing installations. And Jeff told us that none of his work has been canceled or held up, and adds that his backlog remains booked for the rest of the year.
We're busy already. We're usually 6 to 8 months out, year round we work. Even up here in Buffalo, we get snow, we work, we build. But the strange part for me in my business is, and being in business this long, I've been through 3 recessions, blizzards, various other things, 9/11, and now this. And I know it sounds weird, but we got busier. Now, in our case, we're many, many months off. We're towards the end of the year. We've basically got the rest of the year filled out with work for what we do. And so I think people in a long-term investment, they're not afraid to say yes, sign their name to the bottom line for 6 or 8 months from now. I think in the back of their mind, they're thinking, this is not all going to go away, but we're going to get started and move forward, and there's going to be an explosion of business. So if they want to get the work done by us, They want to get on our list before they can.
Meanwhile, going back to Virginia, over in Fredericksburg, Virginia, Jack Bailey Sr. is the president of JBR Incorporated, and he called what he's been seeing recently a bidding frenzy, and that's a quote. The $16 million site developer typically delivers between 200 and 300 lots per year to housing developers. And he says in one 10-day stretch recently, the company bid $32 million worth of jobs. Bailey tells us that when things started to hit, the first thing he did was pick up the phone and ask his owners where everything stood, and they told him that everything was fully funded. And around Fredericksburg, Bailey tells us that people are still buying houses.
Yeah, I think there are some jobs that are just too big to stop. Once the earth movers move in, there's a whole chain of financing and things that have to happen to keep things from disintegrating. And so if you've got earth movers on the site, it's a large site, you're doing a big job that's financed through your local sources or wherever, those sorts of jobs need to continue to go on. And I think that the people that finance those sorts of jobs realize this. I think the smaller jobs, I'm hearing a lot of people with smaller jobs saying that's not the case for them. But when you talk about a $10 million, $20 million, $30 million job, some of those just can't be canceled without a cascading series of financial disasters. And so I think the money behind a lot of those jobs is going to continue to flow. And if they're big federal jobs, the money has already been allocated, so there's no problem keeping those jobs going.
Now, another large element to how the pandemic is affecting contractors has been the availability of federal aid programs such as the Economic Injury Disaster Loan and the Paycheck Protection Program loan provided through the U.S. Small Business Administration. Tom, what did you hear from the Lesters in Texas on these programs?
Yeah, the Lesters have applied for the Paycheck Protection Program, and I think all but one of the 8 contractors I talked to has done the same thing. The Lesters also told me they're in a contractor peer group that meets regularly, and Melissa said she called 10 of the people. She heard back from 8 of them, and she says all but 2 of them have applied for that Paycheck Protection Program. So it's a very popular program. The people I talked to, almost all of them had already received the funds, so they're ready to pull the trigger on those funds if they need them, and they're in a local bank, so they can do that without any further delay.
Now, at World Construction in New Jersey, Jim Davis Jr. says that they did submit an application for the PPP, and they did receive word recently that they had been approved for that program.
You know, the incentive for us would be to keep as many on as possible in terms of our team. No one wants to let anybody go, especially in these times, because that's a family. And we have 30 employees, we have 30 families we got to think about. We've always worked hard and done the right thing, and this we're again, if we are fortunate enough to reap some of the rewards of this PPP program, we're going to definitely take that and dump it right into our employees.
And at CLS Excavation in Liberty Hill, Texas, President Clint Stevenson made the decision to keep all of his 15 or so employees on salary, and he hasn't made any layoffs despite the company's work being completely halted. He applied for and has been approved for a PPP loan, which he says will greatly help the company.
All my guys are salary, and I mean, I went ahead and let them know immediately, you know, hey, don't worry about it. I mean, you're not going to get laid off and all that, regardless of the PPP. That's my problem. So the last thing I want or need them to be doing is worried about that. Yeah, that will take, you know, it'll help with a little bit of stress here and whatnot. We did have a kind of a slow start to the year because it was so wet and everything. And then, you know, one of our jobs that we were doing took a little bit as far as getting the permit. That one that we ended up getting to get knocked out in Austin before it got shut down, that one took about 30 to 45 days longer to get the permit, but we were able to get it right before everything happened. And so, sure, that'll definitely help take some pressure off of us.
Now, Jeff Gertie over at Just Barnes has a little bit different of a perspective on the PPP because his company has seen no interruption thus far from the pandemic. He said he is leaving that money for the companies that actually need it.
to give those people a lifeline, those business owners that aren't sleeping at night right now. They're worried about their family's future, their own wives, kids, their workers' futures. They're wondering if they're ever going to be able to reopen, if everything they've done for all these years is now for nothing and it's gone because our government shut them down. They need the money, perhaps, and we just didn't.
So, Tom, from the contractors that you talk to, what is your sense of how much these federal aid programs, and I'll say specifically the PPP, how much is that going to help them? What kind of weight is that going to lift off their shoulders?
I think it's going to be a big help for those that wind up needing it. Like I mentioned, a lot of our contractors we've talked to haven't laid anybody off yet, but if they do, they don't want those crews and those workers to wander off from construction and never come back. You remember in the last recession, pretty much in every recession since the 80s, every time there was a deep recession and construction companies laid off people, they never got them back. We are still not at the same level of employment in construction now as we were in 2008. So I think it's very important for the owners of these companies to go after that paycheck protection, use it if you have to. You can make up the difference or pay it off as a loan later on, but later on you may not get your workers back, and that would demonstrate a lot of loyalty to these companies. And like I said, this has never happened before, and if the construction industry wants to hang on to the people they've got, the owners of all the companies that qualify for paycheck protection should investigate it. You don't have to use it. It's money that's deposited in the bank account. It'll sit there for, I'm not sure how long, but it'll be there for a while. And if you do need it, you can tap it instantly. And by all means, I would encourage people to take advantage of it.
You know, kind of a nice segue here from the seeing the PPP as a way to kind of continue the momentum that a lot of contractors have kind of gained in kind of a rebound from the 2008 economic downturn. You know, a lot of them have also been forced to kind of adapt to this new situation. And I think one of the more interesting things I've heard during this time from contractors is exactly how they've adapted their day-to-day and the logistics of their operations, and really how most of them agree that the way they do their jobs is likely to forever be impacted by these changes. So at World Construction in New Jersey, they've implemented rotating office schedules and social distancing measures to make sure employees don't come into contact with one another more than is necessary. But Jim Davis Jr. tells us that one of the things that stood out to him most during this time was how really the daily operations of the business never really have hurt, even though most everybody on the administrative side of the company has been working from home. And that's all really been thanks to cloud software.
Luckily, we're set up on the cloud, so we're able to have a lot of work remotely, and that's definitely been a plus. And it was, something that we didn't foresee when we got on the cloud 4 years ago, but it turns out it was good. So we had really no disruption in service from the admin side, which was a plus for the business. But the cloud has just given us the flexibility to be remote, be anywhere, and jump onto our company server, and also have our phones VoIP through the internet provider. So our phones actually work through the cloud as well. So again, the disruption of service from the admin side has been very minimal, and it's been a great asset with people being able to connect while not in the office, and customers calling our office and directed to those remote sites. It's just been a great advantage that, like you said, never thought 4 years ago we would need it for this.
So we said earlier that World's backlog has not really been impacted all that much outside of a few public projects that have been postponed. Meanwhile, other bids are still happening for the company thanks to conference calls.
We actually just did a conference call bid opening last week. The same reason the customer didn't want contractors and unnecessary people walking around town hall, so they gave a number and read the bid via conference call. So there's, everybody's learning, new tricks. Everybody's learning new new ways to do business.
We also heard from the Lind Corporation, a contractor out of Pittston, Pennsylvania. And Scott Lind, the president of that company, told us that these changes, these moves to cloud software, the kind of opening up to the idea of employees working from home, Scott Lind says that these changes are not likely to go away after this. One of the things that he told us, he said there's a lot of things that would not have been tried before in our industry that have now been tried and found to have worked. And Lynn adds that we as owners have found out that we don't go broke when people work from home. They still do their work and they still care. So Tom, how have the Lesters in Texas, how have they been adapting to their new day-to-day?
Like just about every contractor I've talked to, the Lesters jumped on all the best practices and protocols put out by the CDC for keeping social distancing with their crews and on their equipment and in their office. So for instance, when there's two guys in a truck and it's a crew truck, one guy sits in the front, one guy sits in the back. If they don't have that back seat, then you only put one person in a truck. The cabs are wiped down and cleaned every day, all those sort of sanitation things. They even put a note on the front door of their company that says, if you have business to conduct with Lester Contracting, please send me an email, don't come inside. So the thing I like about the construction industry is that nobody's taking this lightly. They're jumping on the bandwagon with protecting their people and doing all the steps they can do physically possibly to do to keep their employees safe from these viruses.
So, Tom, like I said before, some of the contractors that we talked to, they said that these changes, whether it be conference call bidding, allowing employees to work from home, or simply just abiding by these social distancing guidelines, they're likely the new normal for the foreseeable future and maybe even beyond. What have you been hearing, and how do you think that the changes that have had to been made in the face of this pandemic, how do you think it changes the face of this industry?
Yeah, one of the things I've always noticed about contractors is they tend to have two cell phones and sometimes two radios in the cab of their truck. They're always working remotely because they're driving around to job sites. They're always interacting either text or cell messages or radio messages. So unlike retail workers or hospitality workers, bars and restaurants and stuff like that, there aren't a lot of people in construction who work shoulder to shoulder. So it's an industry I think that could go back to work with a few basic precautions pretty quickly. And even for the office people, most bidding and estimating is done with a guy just hovered over a computer for hours at a time. So that doesn't have to happen in an office. That can happen anywhere you've got an internet connection. And again, lots of the communications that happen in construction happen at a distance. So I think that all bodes well for employment in the construction industry, for keeping a lot of workers in the construction industry safe. And the other thing is they all have safety meetings once a week. Some of them have once a day, and site supervisors can use that to remind people of the safe distancing policies and all the sanitation policies that go along with keeping your people kind of clear of the virus. So in a lot of ways, construction can do a lot of work remotely. Most of them have done a lot of work remotely before, and I think it'll be a natural transition for people. There may be time where they need to get face-to-face meetings, but again, you do have Zoom, you do have FaceTime, you do have a lot of other technologies that'll help you achieve those things. So I think the construction industry is poised fairly well to manage this crisis well.
All right, so Tom, we're going to finish up our discussion today, just kind of talking a little bit about how most contractors see things playing out. Now, I know the Lesters have a pretty diversified business. Tell me a little bit about what you heard from them on kind of how they anticipate to kind of approach the rest of this year and maybe even into 2021.
Yeah, well, Ken Lester told me that last year he turned down a lot of jobs just because they were too busy. He said this year he's called all those people back up and said, hey, if you're still interested, we can still do it. So he's going back, finding clients that he was too busy for last year and seeing if he can get work from them. He's also realized that he needs to put more eggs in different baskets. So he's looking for more civil work. He's looking for more government work.
You know, the thing that has always helped us, and we've talked about it before, is being diversified. We don't do strictly oil field work, or we don't do strictly, petrochemical industrial work. We do a little bit of everything. So So it helps us when one sector falls off, then we'll focus on another sector.
Okay.
Right now, we're bidding quite a bit of government stuff, from local level all the way to federal level work that we're looking at in this time period, because we're going to get some federal stimulation. There's also work from Hurricane Harvey.
Mm-hmm.
So that's starting to hit the coast right now. FEMA money, federal money for damage repair and what have you that Harvey caused. So we're watching the government work pretty closely right now.
Yeah, I heard similar from Clint Stevenson over in Liberty Hill, Texas, and most contractors that I talk to expect things to pick back up even as early as the second or third quarter of this year, and Clint shares in that optimism. Though his work has been up to this point in his career basically 100% private, Clint says that he plans on making changes in order to be ready to perform work for both the state of Texas and the federal government.
First thing is the local governments are going to have to start issuing new permits. So that's first and foremost. And then hopefully the banks honor their commitment to those projects that they've already made. But then moving forward, I don't know if it will take the federal government saying, hey, we will back these loans, for the banks to get comfortable with it, or if they're going to go ahead and just be comfortable. I mean, we're in an uber hot market here. And so even when it's bad, it's probably still good. People are still moving here every day. This part of Texas where we're in is, it is very desirable. Mm-hmm. Very desirable. Land's still relatively inexpensive. It's beautiful here. Great schools, all of that good stuff. And so, none of that is changing. And people being locked up in, at home with each other, I think a lot of them realize or think now, well, maybe my house is a little too small. And so, I've had home builders tell me they expect larger home sales to start going up now. So, I mean, I believe it's going to, but, that's part of me. I have to believe it's going to be good. If I think it's not, then that's not good for my business either. So I've got to believe it's going to take off again. And there seems to be a lot of pent up here.
So given the optimistic outlook that most contractors shared with us, we then asked them if they had any plans on buying any new or used equipment in the near future to perform the work that they feel is coming down the pipe. And as you'd expect, most of the contractors that we spoke with said that they are holding off at this point on any purchases, either having already made some purchases at the top of the year or waiting to see if any used equipment deals pop up once the pandemic's impacts have fallen off a little bit. Well, after all, right now, just about every major construction equipment manufacturer out there is offering some kind of financing deal on new equipment, be it 60, 90, or even 120 days, zero interest. Tom, what have you heard from the contractors that you spoke with in terms of taking advantage of these deals or, later on down the line, maybe even buying used equipment?
Yeah, the 8 people I interviewed, 6 of them plan to continue their capital spending for this year. And like you said, I've heard a lot of good deals are coming down the pike. Dealers are getting very aggressive with low interest or zero interest loans, extended warranties, cash discounts, anything it takes to close the deal. But the majority of contractors I talk to are going to continue to spend. They haven't canceled any of their planned purchases for this year. And the one thing I thought was interesting, Brandon Nice, we mentioned him before, he's VP of Construction Operations at David A. Nice. He said they need the equipment in the second and third quarters to be able to do the work to bring in the revenue. If they don't have the equipment, they're not going to be able to bring in the revenue. So they're continuing to buy equipment on schedule. And I think just about all the people I talked to are keeping a real sharp eye out for used equipment in the auctions this year, because a lot of them think there's going to be companies going out of business and some real good bargains to pick up in the future.
So that is going to wrap it up for us here today on our look at how the coronavirus pandemic has impacted the way contractors are doing their work today and even beyond. Tom, thank you so much for joining me. Always awesome to talk with you.
Hey, thank you, Wayne. It's a good discussion.
If you liked this video or found the information in it useful in any kind of way, do us a favor and hit the like button below. It really does help our channel out. And if you want more videos on the latest in the construction industry, equipment, gear, trucks, and more, subscribe below and turn on notifications so you're getting up-to-the-minute alerts whenever we drop a new video. Thank you so much again for watching, and we will see you next time.